Welcome to this Inbound Logistics video podcast presented by Inbound Logistics Magazine. Today, we're going to be talking about what strong fleets will do differently in 2026. Our guest is Mark Hill, Chief Executive Officer of PCS Software. And here's our host, Amy Roach.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, Mark. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, Amy. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to have you. We have a lot to unpack and talk about today. But before we jump in, if you would just, introduce yourself, give us a little bit of your background and tell us a quick overview about PCS Software.
Yeah, absolutely. PCS is a TMS provider primarily focused on carriers, asset-based brokers, and a shipper business also. Been in business for 29 years, so really deep and thorough front to back office capabilities within the platform, but taking advantage of a lot of the new technologies that are coming into play in our industry, and really have found ourselves as not only having the deepest of workflows out there, but that now really a front runner in the adoption of some of these newer technologies, the AI technologies, and applying them to this business. Myself, I came to the business in April of 2024. My history is primarily around very complex businesses, typically that in kind of the ERP or business operating system space. And all of the businesses I've been in have been, it's been notable that they've been heavy cyclical industries. So coming into transportation, very similar to much of what I've done in my past, heavy cyclical industry, kind of all of the same, kind of markers for up market and down market, and then certainly bringing solutions and technology to that to help these businesses run better businesses.
Great. Okay, great. Well, certainly cyclical industry makes sense when we're talking about trucking fleets. And we're moving hopefully out of one cycle maybe and into a more optimistic cycle. But we want to talk about strong fleets and what they can do differently in 2026. But just tell me from your vantage point, what is a strong fleet this year? What makes a company have what we would consider a really strong fleet right now?
Yeah, we're fortunate. We have a pretty large customer base. I get to spend a lot of time, not only with them personally, but also with their data. Certainly some companies have thrived through this downturn, and I think that sets them up nicely for the upturn, and they'll really accelerate their capabilities and their business strength. But what really made fleet strong was understanding their strength. Right? Mm-hmm. When the hard times came about, those that understood what they were good at really doubled down in those areas. That was the key to living through the downturn in the freight recession and really understanding how they can, accelerate those relationships, those capabilities, and just really invest in the things that separated them from their competition, and really gave them an opportunity to run profitable freight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been all about resiliency, I think. Is that sort of fair to say?
Very much resiliency, also predictability, right? If they knew what it was they were good at, and then they could portray that and deliver on that for their customers, that was all very important. And if they could bring that to the table and then get to know, certainly, hey, help the industry know, hey, here's what we're good at. Here's what we're going to double down on. Here's how we're going to serve you. And they could do that in a predictable sort of way. All of a sudden, they were rewarded with more and more sustainable business.
Right. So what would you say then are some of the lessons learned for those companies that were able to thrive through the hard times? And I guess, how does that position them for strength and resiliency as we move forward?
Yeah, I think the most important thing about being at a fork in the road is knowing that you were at a fork in the road. And I'll go back to the beginning of the freight recession. Certainly, there were a lot of good times coming out of COVID. There was an abundance of opportunity for all of these organizations. And those that were realizing that were early adopters to understanding that, in fact, the market was changing when the market was changing in, the 22 into the 23 time period, and they could take action early and really start to understand how the changes were coming about. That really was the big lesson. They needed to understand that, in fact, the world had shifted underneath their feet, and they needed to address this new market that was out there. Similarly, as we came into, kind of 25 and, kind of progressed through 25, what I've seen is from the bottom of the market, the fleets that are now ready to take advantage of the upturn were those that really worked on cleaning up their own house over the course of 24 and 25. So whether that was, make sure we have the right people in the right seats, making sure that we had the right shipper relationships, we were running the right lanes, we really understood our strengths, or it was getting their kind of systems house in shape or getting their data in shape. They really kind of knew that the times were changing. Let's get ready and make sure that our organization is ready to take advantage of that uptick.
Right, right. Okay, that makes sense. And I think the story has been volatility, and tight margins. So what's the story moving forward? Are we expecting more of that, or are we turning a corner here? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I definitely don't want to predict markets. Not my game. I want to be ready for whatever comes for us. And I think we saw in 24 where we were really, I'm sorry, in 25, where we were really looking for a change in the market. And I think we were all starting to feel pretty good in the January, February timeframe. Not that rates were ticking up dramatically, but at least we were seeing some strength in some different areas. And there was a lot of chatter in the industry in, kind of the end of 2024 into early 2025. Hey, maybe this is the year. Of course, we hit kind of the tariff fork in the road then in April, and that really changed the dynamics of the whole business over the course of 25. And we spent the better part of the summer and into the fall kind of dealing with the, kind of the volatility introduced by the tariffs. So we saw that in our business where our customers went from, pretty steady business. We have a decent number of customers that operate kind of on the outskirts of the port or, business driven off of the ports in the country. And then many of the folks that deal with the manufacturers, we just saw a dramatic amount of volatility and change when we didn't expect it. So I think that the lesson is for this year, let's take advantage of any ground that we gain with regard to rates, but also let's just be ready to be agile in the businesses and then make sure that we're ready to, if volatility shows up again, we're ready to react as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think we're hearing a little bit of an exhale, from our audience that with the tariffs, obviously, maybe they don't love where they are, but they kind of know where they are now and they know what they have to do. And there's less uncertainty around, is this going to happen? Is this sticking around? Is it changing? So I guess what's the shift there? Do you still have to be cautious about the next unknown bump in the road or is there a little room to exhale?
You do. And, I had an experience over the course of this past summer, right? I think it's hardest when you expect that there's going to be an upturn and then your expectations are dashed and something negative happens or something bad happens. And I spent a lot of time with our customers out in the field and was up in Chicago with one of our customers, kind of a mid-sized fleet, call it 100, 125 trucks. And while we were in his shop amongst his dispatchers, pretty jovial individual and all good. And once that door shut here, and this is June or early July this past summer, once that door shut, he literally put his hands in his head and said, I just don't know what I'm going to do. I can't take another down step. Right. And so I think that the understanding the flexibility of, that really hit him because while he was looking for good times, one more kind of dashed hope really impacted him and, impacted me in that moment to say, God, we got to really make sure that our customers understand we have to be ready for whatever flies at us. Now, similarly, right, like you just said, we've heard and felt some optimism from across our customer base over the course of Q4 of this year. And now kind of continuing into the first quarter, the first couple of months of 2026 here. So, we're cautiously optimistic, but I think still the watchword is volatility comes from a lot of different areas and a lot of different directions. Let's just play heads up ball, stay on our, kind of on our toes and be ready for whatever comes at us.
Yeah, right. Okay, great. So let's talk then a little bit again about our theme of kind of doing things differently. So whether you survived or even did well despite the volatility, or whether you're, preparing for good or bad this year, what can you do differently maybe from, what everyone else is doing or what you've done in the past to, really get to that strong fleet status for this year?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that just so back in the fall, we do our customer summit around the October of every year. And during that period, we really take the opportunity to benchmark where our customer base was. They're always very interested, not only in how they're doing, but then how they're doing against the rest of their peers, industry,
Sure.
whatever else it is. So we do a decent amount of benchmarking during that period. What we find is there really isn't a pattern with regard to the profile of the organization, the focus of the organization, or I should say the vertical of the organization. What it really comes down to is the better run fleets understand their cost to serve, and they understand what they do well, and they double down on the doing well. So we see big fleets and small fleets. We see, kind of diverse. We see them in different segments and different geographies. That's just kind of how our customer base is broken up. But what it really comes down to, and we see a broad distribution of profitability, right? From kind of into the double digits, right? The low teens. It often doesn't get a lot higher than that, into the down to the negatives, and across that whole distribution, the most common thing that indicates that they're going to be successful is that they understand their market, and they understand at every angle what is their cost to serve. So I think what fleets need to do differently, some behaviors they need to unlearn, right? They need to don't chase bad freight, don't stray too far outside of your capabilities until you're really ready to, and you've thought it out, and really understand kind of what your operating posture, or your operating metrics are.
Yeah, those are great. I like that. Don't chase bad freight. I feel like that's a bumper sticker waiting to happen.
I hate to even think that it happens, but I can't tell you how many conversations we're in. And it often comes from, deep in the organization, that it's like, hey, I know this is the wrong thing. We're driving all of these miles deadhead to go get this thing. And then when you look at kind of the net profitability, which we often do with our customers, right? We do some optimization work and say, hey, here's all your data. Here's what we're seeing out of it, and help you. We see that often, and man, stop doing that, right? Understand. Here's what I'll tell you though. I think it often comes from a good place, right? They often know they need more revenue. They think that it is good revenue. It's not because they're just trying to make bad decisions. They just don't have all the data fast enough to make that good decision.
Sure. That makes sense. There's always a lot of pressure for the revenue, so you can see how those decisions come into play.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would imagine, obviously, part of doing this differently and doing this well comes back to technology. So, tell us a little bit about where you see technology playing in, automation, AI. What are you looking for as a strong fleet, in 2026?
Yeah. So AI definitely has been the buzzword, not just in this space, but in all industries. When we listen to the kind of the broader media message, it is moving fast, and it's really having it's really being impactful in a lot of different businesses. I personally think that, in fact, yes, that is absolutely true. I come from a place, I've been in technology for a long time. I actually had my first AI team work for me probably in 2012 or 2013, before these technologies were highly accessible to the broader industry. These technologies can be just monumental in helping people do more, or overcome the more mundane tasks at this point. And I think that's really where the biggest impact is here in 2026 at this point. But I think we have to figure out how to get our data in shape, get our systems in shape, because it's moving so quickly that those carriers, those asset-based brokers, which is who we deal with most of the time, those that adopt this technology more efficiently and more effectively, faster, are going to be in a more profitable position, and then hence a more competitive position. So, what we think about in 2026 is, let's make sure that we're trying a lot of different things, but that we also, there's a saying in technology, fail fast. And we should bring that phrase into transportation and really start to adopt it, because the only way to learn these technologies is to really try them out. Not everything is going to work, and then you have to cut ties when it doesn't work. So I encourage people, try out these technologies, bring them into your shop, don't overspend, figure out what works, and then fail fast and get rid of what doesn't work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously TMS is, a big chunk of your world. How is AI playing into the TMS space, and, how can that be a benefit to fleet operators?
Listen, it's life changing, and I think it's life changing for our particular segment of the industry. My prediction on the market, and I will predict software markets, just not freight markets or other commodity markets, but technology markets, I feel like I have a good handle on. The typical lifespan of a TMS in our space is, 8, 10. We have customers that have been with their TMS for 12, 15, 20 years, right? So it is a very long-standing, very sticky technology. My prediction is that, in fact, most organizations that want to be competitive will come to market looking for a new TMS in the next 3 to 4 years.
Oh,
What's
wow.
driving that is there is just going to be a dramatic shift into, or an enablement by these AI technologies. I know there's a lot of naysayers out there right now, but as these technologies shift from being able to manage the mundane tasks and the manual labor that's going on into making more decisions, which is going to happen over the next couple of years, it's going to separate the haves from the have-nots in not just this industry, but most industries that use these kind of complex workflow software. So I really think over the next couple of years, and we're trying to lead in this space, bringing AI native technologies, understanding how they impact the really deep workflows that are important to keep a trucking company running, is going to separate, and organizations are going to be looking for systems that can in fact bring those tools to bear in a very native, comprehensive way to their business.
Interesting. Did you say 3 to 5 years? The next 3 to 5 years?
4 years. I mean, I really think like right now, people are going to start looking at their vendors, and at this time next year, all of us will have sorted it out. So all the vendors will have already come out and said, hey, this is our approach. This is what we care about. This is what we're good at. And there's going to be a reshuffling of the deck of the vendors, and those that are able to natively embed and bring these AI technologies to the market are going to, kind of, I would say, outpace the more, kind of traditional vendors that are out there. It's just, it's got to happen. And, it's not like we're unique in this industry. That's essentially what is happening in the more forward technology industries, like banking and trading and those types of things. Those core systems that have already started to embed agentic technology and understanding how to use these technologies are far outpacing those that aren't.
Wow. So if you're a fleet manager evaluating a TMS software, today, it better have AI sometime soon is kind of the message.
And it's not just have AI, right? There's a couple, we in TMS have been just master integrators for the last 20 years, 25 years of this business, right? That's been kind of the watchword of the business. And if you look at any of our websites, mine, my competitors, we have 125 integrations, right? In a new agentic world, that all kind of changes a little bit. Everyone is going to be good at what they do, but all of a sudden the integration becomes, kind of table stakes. It's not something that is a badge of honor anymore. It's just something that is kind of natural, that data flows through systems. That's how it goes. But it's not a place to integrate in a core capability like AI. Right. There are certainly some instances where there might be a capability or a technology that is really cool. We should integrate it. We should do it. But at the end of the day, the brain of the operation is the TMS, and the brain has to apply to those core workflows. So our approach, right, really our strategy, our philosophy on the whole thing is just like, I don't know, mathematics and, addition and subtraction and kind of how we do formulas in workflows. That's how native it's going to be, because it's really the thought process behind the workflow. So native is important.
Yeah, got it. Okay. And what are some of the other things that companies should be looking at right now when they are looking for technologies for the rest of this year?
Yeah, I think there's also, kind of a big push around just general communications. We saw many of the AI technologies kind of come out of the chute with regard to voice agents and that type of thing. That was most of the news was made in our industry around those things. But I think the reason for that is we wanted more streamlined communication between carrier and shipper. We wanted more streamlined communication between dispatch and driver and between, all of the different facets. So the other set of technologies that I think are important this year is just streamlining communication. What we see in a lot of our carriers is just a multitude of different communication methods that are just, sloppy and unmanageable. So whether that's just, the mound of email that they're dealing with, or spreadsheets being passed amongst the different leaders in the organization, or text messages across 3 or 4 different platforms out with your, kind of your drivers, right? Somehow that all has to come together for fleets and make sure that not only are we keeping communication as streamlined as possible, but we're able to mine that and understand signals where there might be a, kind of impending problem, or a frustrated driver, or, a confused shipper, right? I think the technologies that are out there can start to deliver some of those things to us, and we can start to derive intelligence from the communication, not just streamline it.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. How about on the data side? Are there certain key metrics that are really important right now?
Yeah, I don't, nothing new there, right? But it is the new is just even better understanding of your kind of operating margins and your operating leverage, right? If you know where, so I think what the industry has done, at least the transportation or the trucking side of the business, we've tried to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper in our cost to serve. And I'll just compliment. I think my carrier customers, my asset-based broker customers, they've done everything they can to cut costs, right?
Yeah.
They really came at it as best they could. They did everything they could within their own organization. They're running more thin than they have to be. But I think also many of them came away from that understanding really where their leverage points were. So now they can start to apply, either technology or better processes to some of those leverage points, not necessarily to drive down more costs, but they can understand as they cut more business, how they can make sure they continue to be profitable. I think one of the risks that we run is we rush too fast, too quickly back to spending, or even overspending, right? Because we've been in a deficit, right? We're kind of hungry for some new systems, hungry for some new machines. We're kind of hungry to give people raises. And so we have to kind of match the re-spending, or kind of the rebuilding of spend, with the rebuilding of the rates.
Yeah, got it. Okay. All right, great. I wanted to see if you had maybe a customer case study that you could share with the audience, somebody who's kind of put all these things together and is in a great position to be a strong fleet for this year. If you have anything like that you could share, that would be great.
Yeah, we are very fortunate. We have a good number of strong fleets, but there's a couple that kind of come to mind. I'll share 2 quick stories. One, I would consider and definitely put in the A+ fleet. The other, I would put in, most improved, or soon to be most improved, because I think those are just 2 important lessons. A+ fleet. They knew what their strength was. So through the downturn, and I will say that they're, kind of on the periphery of or they're embedded in the manufacturing supply chain. So not only do we have all of the problems of the freight cycle, but we've also been in a manufacturing cycle that's been, down over the course of the last couple of years. So this particular carrier was deep in both of those, but they understood what their, kind of what their place was, and they're deep in the auto manufacturing supply chain. And so I think from that, they were able to really collapse their organization in some aspects and double down on some very valuable shipper relationships that they had. And through that, not only did they get more profitable, but they were able to grow, kind of horizontally within that set of shipper relationships. They became more trusted, so they got more of the business. Ultimately, as the freight market went on and more folks got weakened, they got stronger. And in fact, that supply chain then extended, not just from kind of the regional focus that they had, but they were able to focus, they were able to expand within that same supply chain broader nationally, and then even internationally into Mexico. So what we watched that carrier do over the last 2 years was not just grow from a revenue perspective, but we also, watched them grow in profitability during that same time. They stayed in their lane. They understood what their strengths were. They doubled down on the relationship that they had with their customers, and then they just focused on service and delivery in those areas. They were rewarded with it.
Mm-hmm.
The other example, very interesting. This was a conversation we've been having with this, and it's more of a mid-sized customer. Let's call it about 75 or 100 trucks. And in fact, that particular carrier came to us and said, "Listen, I know 20-25% of my decisions that I'm making on freight are the wrong decision. The real question is, what is wrong, right? It's not 180 degrees. It's not completely wrong, like we just blew it all up. Sometimes that means it could be better."
Mm-hmm.
So what we saw over them, we really started to understand, analyze that. Hey, why are you making that? And it really came back down to a misunderstanding of or a lack of understanding of their costs of, kind of how they were managing their business. As we started to tune that over the course of Q3 and Q4, give them some visibility into what freight opportunities actually, when you looked at the whole transaction, was going to yield more profitability. What we're starting to see from them is, first, they could admit they had a problem and understand what the problem was. We did deep dive due diligence on where that problem came from, which was not lack of opportunity. It was lack of the right opportunities coming to play. And so we help them understand what is the right opportunity. And I will say, and I'm highly optimistic, 2026 is going to be their year to really eke up their profitability and kind of get into that top quartile of what we see from our customers.
Nice. Fantastic. Yeah, those are great, because I think you're not talking about anything revolutionary, just smart business, like you said, doubling down on the basics and really kind of understanding where your opportunities are.
Totally. And I think, coming out of the freight recession period, so many people were traumatized by just not only having to cut through the early parts of it, but then when is it going to end? And then when is the bad news going to stop coming? That it's hard to pick your head up and go, okay, now let me look for opportunities. Let me make sure we're ready. And it's really those leaders that can kind of get out of the funk of the moment and look out over the next horizon and say, hey, good times will come again. I want to make sure we're ready for it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, great. Well, as we wrap up, I'll just throw it back to you one more time. Any other priorities or any other, tips or insights that we didn't touch on that strong fleets should be, looking to do this year?
Yeah, no, I think that's it. I think the key is, don't be afraid of the technology. Let's start getting out there and making sure we understand it. Let's spend every minute that we possibly can cleaning up our data. Like, having a tidy house just makes it much easier when a bunch of company comes over and everybody needs to know where everything is. Getting the house in order as soon as possible. And I think the most important thing is check in with our front line. Right. That's where all the knowledge in the organization is. And there's just a lot of great insights. And whether it be the dispatchers, the drivers, the accounting people, I just always encourage leadership. I try to take the same advice myself. Let's check in with our front line and make sure that they're, kind of understanding the changes that we're going through, the strategy that we have, and that we're, kind of bringing them along for the ride.
Perfect. Fantastic. Mark, thank you so much. Great insights. And thanks for spending some time with us today. Really appreciate it.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.